Analysis of Hawk Roosting by Ted Hughes for the AQA GCSE Literature exam. Hawk Roosting. I sit in the top of the wood, my eyes closed. In action, no falsifying dream between my hooked head and hooked feet, or in sleep rehearse perfect kills and eat. The convenience of the high trees, the air's buoyancy and the sun's ray are of advantage to me, and the earth's face upward for my inspection. My feet are locked upon the rough bark. It took the whole of creation to produce my foot, my each feather. Now I hold creation in my foot, or fly up and revolve it all slowly. I kill where I please because it is all mine. There is no sophistry in my body. My manners are tearing off heads, the allotment of death. For the one path of my flight is direct through the bones of the living. No arguments assert my right. The sun is behind me. Nothing has changed since I began. My eye has permitted no change. I am going to keep things like this. Right, now analysing it with the poem with FLIRTS, form, language, imagery, rhythm, rhyme, tone and subject. We're starting with the subject. So, the hawk in the poem represents an arrogant and self-obsessed dictator. Or, the hawk represents a sniper used in war as a killing machine. Or, the hawk represents a hawk. Right, I've put these three up here because this poem is ambiguous in its message, as are some of the others, but there are kind of three central interpretations, really. I kind of go along with the first one, and perhaps this video will be more along the lines of that, looking at a fascist dictator, a tyrant. Some people see it as being that it is a sniper, but Ted Hughes, I mean, it caused a lot of controversy when it was published, in that they thought that it was about the fascist dictator, and Ted Hughes responded to this and just said, it's about a hawk. It's about giving voice to a natural predator and exploring nature. He was very much a poet concerned with nature as a theme, as we have seen in his previous poem in the collection, Bayonet Charge, with the farming imagery and the hare image and so on. So he said, no, it's just a poem about a hawk. So it's important to think about all three of these, I think, and I will try and, when I talk about the speaker, I will tend to speak in those general terms rather than connecting it with the dictator, the sniper, or the hawk. But at some point, I do, as I said, I do go along with the first interpretation, that this is looking at the arrogance of a tyrant, a despot. So the form, there's the first three stanzas. We see that they are regular and uniform in length. There are, in terms of the structure of the poem, there are pairs of stanzas, and these pairs, so the first two, then the middle two, and the final two, they all develop the representation or the presentation of the speaker. Now, the uniform length of each stanza reflects the speaker's tight control on its surroundings. The speaker is strong, and it dominates, and the regularity of each stanza in terms of its length, in terms of the lines, the four lines, so each stanza is a quatrain. It indicates this strength and this control. The pairs of stanzas show a development. The first two show the physical superiority of the speaker. The middle two stanzas discuss how the speaker sees themselves within the context of the nature, within the context of its surroundings. And then the final stanzas, so that should be 5 and 6, not 4 and 5, but the final two stanzas show an explanation and a justification of its actions. Now, the language, we see lots of first-person pronouns. We also see a repetition of negatives in the poem. And the poem is written in simple and direct language. Just because there might be a couple of words in there that are difficult to, that are, so sophistry, for example, is perhaps, we would not say that that was a simple vocabulary, but on the whole, it is written in simple and direct language. So the repetition of the first person pronouns show how central to the poem the speaker is. It's also, he's egotistical, it is egotistical, and it's self-centered, and by placing lots of these first personal pronouns, I, me, my, mine, highlights the egotistical nature of the speaker. The use of negatives is suggestive of a political speech and political rhetoric. They're political slogans almost. Nothing has changed since I began. No arguments. And it's almost as if they're rejecting rhetoric. Remember, rhetoric is the art of communication, and politicians use rhetoric all the time. They manipulate language, they manipulate phrases and cliches in order to make a particular point. This speaker, however, it's using political slogans, but they are rejecting rhetoric. Okay, no arguments assert my right. They're just relying on their strength and their brute force. The simple and direct language, it contrasts with the violence in the poem. There is lots of violence, violent images. One path of my flight is direct through the bones of the living. My manners are tearing off heads. So there's lots of violent, and we could put that into the imagery section as well. Although I have, I'm not so much. But the speaker here is trying to imitate politicians' sophistication. Another typo there. See if you can spot that. A politician's sophistication. But in reality, the speaker is just some brutal thug. Now, as I've said, there is some violent imagery, but I'm going to look at some other imagery within the poem. So, as I've said in other videos, these aren't the be-all and the end-all, and I know that some people have made some comments about my interpretations. That's fine. You don't have to completely go along with all of mine, but just use these as another way of looking at things. But your teachers may have focused more on violent imagery. In fact, I have done in my own lessons, but these are some other images that we're going to look at. So we have a use of assonance. Assonance is a repetition of vowel sounds, and here we have the repetition of this double E sound. So feet, sleep, eat, trees, me. So although there might not be a double E in the words, they still produce that sound. There is a contrast of God with nature in the whole of creation, and we see this indiscriminate killer, so not choosing victims, just killing where they please. So the assonance of the E sound in the poem, particularly prevalent in the early stanzas, mimics the screech of a hawk. Okay, so going back to the natural imagery in the poem, it is a predominant sound in the poem, and showing how the hawk, it dominates its surroundings. And if you see the hawk as representing something else, then whatever it represents, that shows how that dominates the surroundings and has an effect on the surroundings. Now the speaker talks of how it is a product of creation. It took the whole of creation to produce my foot, my each feather. Now I hold creation in my foot, and it's kind of turned creation on its head. In fact, on the one hand, this is a suggestion of evolution, that the hawk is a product of evolution and has become a supreme predator. It's at the top of its food chain. However, the speaker, Ted Hughes has capitalized. Not that Ted Hughes is the speaker. Sorry, the speaker capitalizes creation, and Ted Hughes has chosen to do this in order to imply a godlike creator, and also that that the speaker thinks of themselves as being made in God's image, which further accentuates the speaker's arrogance and egotism. Again, another punctuation error. Clearly rushed this PowerPoint. See if you can spot it. I'm not going to point it out. Of course, it's a deliberate error just to test you on your literacy, because of course spelling and grammar is part of your literature exam. You'll get 4 marks for spelling and grammar in each question. So my deliberate typos are testing your literacy there as well. Interestingly, the follow-up to that line, of course, is that my each feather now I hold creation in my foot, is that the speaker has become this godlike presence within their habitat, within their own ecosystem, of course. And if you see that as the hawk, they are the predator at the top of its food chain. They can give, or well, they can't give life. Well, they do give life to their own hawks, but they don't give it to other species. But they can take life. If it's the fascist dictator we're looking at, again, they see themselves as godlike in their leadership. The speaker being presented as an indiscriminate killer. This is the ultimate control. They see that their taking of life is the ultimate control, the ultimate power, the ultimate dominance that they have over their habitat and their surroundings. Now, moving on to rhythm and rhyme. Well, there's an irregular meter, so that not all of the lines are the same length, nor do they have the same pattern, and there's no uniform rhyme scheme. Now, I think that this lack of regularity in the meter and the rhyme shows how the speaker is above these things, or considers themselves to be above these things. Now, this contrasts to what I said about form. I said that the regular stanza length shows this tight control that the speaker has. But now I'm saying that because there's no rhythmic pattern or rhyme scheme, it's not that it shows a lack of control, it's that they're above these things. They have ownership and control over their own surroundings, and they're not going to fit into a pattern of rhythm or rhyme in the poem. Okay, so they don't fit into anyone else's kind of dictates. They create their own. So the speaker here is creating his own pattern within the poem. Now the tone. I've used the last stanza here. The tone is sinister and it is threatening, and we have this suggestion at the end of continuity, I think, which adds to this menace within the poem. So this tone of menace, this sinister threat, whether it is representing a dictator or the thought process of the hawk, the natural predator, we are left with a chilling image at the end, that there is little change under the regime of a dictator unless they decide it. Okay, and very little does change under fascist regimes, because the regime is there for the pleasure, if you will, of the dictator, and as long as they're happy, they're not going to change things. And also, by extension, this suggestion that nothing will change, I think Hughes is showing that there are always going to be these types of political leaders. The poem is cyclical in that it starts and ends in a similar way. Both the first and last lines start with the personal pronoun I, showing the centrality of the speaker to the poem, but it also could be a comment on the prevalence of these autocratic leaders. Okay, so these fascist dictators, these tyrants, these despots, the prevalence of them throughout history, and perhaps we are going to continue to see these types of leaders, and therefore I feel that this strengthens this threatening and menacing tone of the poem.